Welcome back into the Between the Hash Marks podcast. As always, I'm Matt Lombardo, joined by my friend, colleague, mentor, the purveyor of the Two Deep Zone, and of course, the hander-outer of some of the most outrageous free agency grades you'll find on the internet. Mike Tanier joins me. Mike, how you doing, my friend?
That's why you always call the person who gives out grades a hander-outer. That's what in the standardized testing industry, when you are grading essays, you are not the assessor or the rater, you are the hander-outer. So yeah,
hand out the tests and then sit there and watch to make sure they're not, passing notes and such.
that's called a proctor. There is a name for this. It's teacher jargon. It's okay. You don't necessarily know this. By the way, happy baseball opening day. Did you know today was baseball opening day?
Those games in Japan count? I assume that they were like spring training games, ship them over there. What's going to happen? I hate that this thing is going off the rails already, but it's the middle of spring training for most teams, and you're sending two teams to Japan.
Yes.
And are they going to come back and do more spring training? What is happening here?
I have no idea, but the game apparently started. First pitch was 5 a.m. Eastern time. And I was actually awake. I could have come down and watched, I think it was Cubs Dodgers. But like, I don't understand this because, on Saturday, I'm at the bar. It's St. Patty's Day. My wife and I are there. And of course, the Phillies are like wearing their green stuff because they're still down in Clearwater, et cetera. And it's like a day later, the Cubs are playing in Japan. I don't imagine this in the NFL where the opening day was like August 14th in like Zimbabwe or someplace like that. And it was like at 4 a.m, and the average fan was like, I'm not even sure what I'm doing. Imagine if the NFL did that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a Friday night game is one thing, stomping over, high school football across the country. That's one thing. But to have it in the middle of training camp like baseball is doing right now would be completely outrageous.
Right. It's like having an NCAA tournament game on Christmas. Like, what are you doing?
Like the playing games on Christmas Eve.
And now I realize that's it. They're actually competing with, like, here's a thing that, like, even the NFL doesn't compete with the tournament. The free agency dies down, etc. And baseball's like, yeah, we're going to crash into this. But here's the trick. Here's how we're going to counter program. 5 a.m. first pitch.
I'm setting my alarm. I'll tell you that. I'll be up tomorrow to watch the next game. No, I kid. A lot of outrageous money being thrown around. We're going to get into that. The Bengals spent some obscene money on their wide receivers, entering a 2 off-season saga and soap opera in Cincinnati. We're going to chat with Carl Pickens, legendary former Bengals wide receiver, to get his take on Jamar Chase signing a record-setting contract, T. Higgins signing a record-setting contract as the highest-paid number 2 wide receiver in the league. A lot going down the pike on this podcast today, sir.
Yes, but I didn't think the Bengals had it in them. Like, literally, I didn't think they had the money available. It wasn't in their bank account to do what they just did.
And you hear the rumblings and the whispers that now they're going to try to work out a deal with Trey Hendrickson to try to keep him in the fold. We'll see if they can do that. Before we get into all of that and a whole lot more, a little bit of housekeeping for you. If you're an NFL fan, if you love the most obscure references and random jokes thrown in about Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny and such, as you're reading your free agency grades, as Mike put together on Monday morning, please subscribe to the Two Deep Zone on Substack. It's a mandatory read each and every week. If you enjoy my work and the insider reporting and the insight from conversations around the league, check out Between the Hash Marks. Follow Mike on Blue Sky at Mike Tanier. I'm at Matt Lombardo on Blue Sky, at Matt Lombardo NFL on Threads. And you can check out the YouTube channel where the podcast lives in video form, and Apple Podcasts. And leave us those 5-star reviews on Apple. They help grow the show.
Right. And if you leave us a 5-star review, even if you rip us, even if you make the most obnoxious comments, nothing obscene, please. But if it's a PG-13 or low, we will read it on the air, whatever you have to say about us.
Absolutely. And we've had some fun reading those reviews in the past. Yes. That's for sure. Mike, we haven't spoken on air since free agency began. The last time we spoke on the pod was you stumbling through Indianapolis, as sports writers tend to do during the NFL Combine, as I wish that I had this year and hopefully will be there next year. But, the 30,000-foot view, your quick takeaways, what have you liked? What have you not liked so far?
Well, first of all, I didn't like the free agent class.
No.
Right. And I think we liked it better as it was coming down the pike. And it's like, well, Higgins might be in it. Ronnie Staley might be in it. Chris Godwin might be in it. Zach Bond might be in it. And then it kind of was like the weekend before free agency. So it was last weekend. One by one, these guys re-sign with their teams. They get the free agent, the franchise tag, etc. And we hit the first day of tampering with almost no one that you could get that excited about. A couple of quarterbacks. Stafford was another guy that might have been out there in the woods. He was taken care of days before everything. So once that hits, the question I ask is who's going to take care of their own guys?
Right.
Because if you're going out there and spending money on like B tier, B minus tier, oh, he's a versatile safety, oh, he's a starting guard. If you're spending money on that, the question is, unless you are an absolute last place team, why aren't you spending that on the guys you have in the building? So when you look at my grades, a lot of teams who get high grades, it is they took care of this guy, they took care of this guy, they took care of their in-house business.
Yeah, and I really liked, and I wrote about this in Monday's column. I liked what Jason Licht did down in Tampa, bringing Chris Godwin and Levante David back, two culture drivers on both sides of the ball. Godwin still remains arguably a top 3 or 4 slot receiver in the league. They have Jalen McMillan and Mike Evans there. Ben Brett is in now. You have all 5 starters along the offensive line back. So I like what they did. I like that Buffalo took care of Josh Allen. They took any sort of uncertainty about his future there. But you're right. That Saturday night and Sunday night, even going into the tampering period where you had DK Metcalf get shipped off to the
Yes.
Steelers. You had the Ronnie Stanley deal come down the pike. Before that, you had Trey Smith get the franchise tag. The top most sought after players, they suddenly were off the board.
Yeah, Trey Smith was another one, and DK. Another thing we thought, oh, this is going to break during the week. It breaks early, so it isn't as much fun. And that also goes with like the Geno transaction, which happens early. So, I mean, a couple of podcasts. I was on with Aaron Schatz. I was on with Jared Bailey. The Seahawks. What are they doing? What's the plan? I think you were charitable toward it. You were positive toward it. So what are you saying?
Yeah, I spoke to a few people around the league just to kind of take that deep dive into both the Sam Darnold signing and the DK Metcalf signing. And there's a little bit of trepidation about the Cooper Kupp signing. There's a little bit of trepidation about Cooper Kupp landing in Seattle, age 31, hasn't had a full season under his belt since 2021, best season of his career. He's obviously the slot receiver, but I had a veteran scout tell me, is Jackson Smith and Jigba ready to be the number 1 receiver? Because if he's not, they don't have one. And you let Tyler Lockett walk, which I understand. It just feels like you're spinning your wheels. And Cooper Kupp might be a great fit with Sam Darnold because he's so good. Both are so good on those 1 to 10 yard routes. Darnold has a 72% completion percentage on throws 1 to 10 yards. Kupp thrives in that area. But it feels like you took an element of explosiveness away from an offense in an era where, Mike, we see it every year. The most explosive passing games are the ones that go the furthest.
Right. And you know who else is good in that short range? Jackson Smith and Jigba. He is the guy that I would say, oh, the plan is to get more verticality around him. And their deep threat right now is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which is, he's coming over kind of as a binky with Clint Kubiak. He caught a couple of bombs when everyone stopped paying attention to the Saints. And I think like 1 or 2 of them was against that bad Commanders secondary when the Commanders were like out there trying to get Lattimore and guys in to help them in that range. So, I guess like, it is such a wheel spin.
Yes.
And it's an expensive wheel spin where when they cut everybody, I said, I get it. They're cutting everybody. It's a clean slate. Then they bring Darnold in. It's like, well, he's a good bridge. He's like a plus bridge quarterback. So you don't have to worry for a year. Maybe you bring Shador in with him or whatever. And then when you bring in Cooper Kupp, it's like we're right back where we started. This is a team that has a lot of salary, and a lot of age, and looks like it's going to cap at 9 wins.
The element where I don't know that these moves were made for 2024 is you look at the cap space they freed up from trading Geno, from moving off of Metcalf. They have something like the 3rd most cap space in the league next offseason, and then the most cap space in the league going into 2027. And a lot can change in that time frame. But if you're looking at this, if you're John Schneider and you're getting draft capital for Geno and for Metcalf, and you're clearing cap space, I guess this is kind of like that Band-Aid year where Darnold and Kupp are there and you're expecting Njigba to take the next step. But I'm with you. It feels like you kind of hopped on a carousel and you're just going to, do the merry-go-round for a year.
Right. If it's the Band-Aid year, maybe I get MVS, maybe I get Coop. I don't get both.
No.
I want those wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 spots to be young guys come get it, young guys who are on the roster come win the roles. Not okay, we got a one-dimensional guy who catches nothing but bombs and an aging like short guy here, and they're going to sort of gobble up opportunities.
Yeah, I don't have the Seahawks on my list of favorite teams. I didn't see the Seahawks as one of the teams with the highest B plus minus plus plus minus plus grades. But which teams came close to getting the A grade for you? Because I have two or three teams that I really liked what they did. I'm curious who kind of your, to borrow the tired SEO farm cliche, your free agent winners. Which teams do you think helped themselves the most this week?
I gave everybody a B because I didn't want to have a free agent winner. I was going to give the Bengals an A on Monday morning when I realized that the deals got done, but then it would have ruined the bit that I was doing. The Broncos, I think they were on both our lists.
Yes.
And
Yep.
there's a certain thing I like in free agency when you do go out and spend. It's targeted. It's a small group of guys. It's guys who have potential high impact, and it's not necessarily that you filled some hole because you should not fill a hole in free agency. You take a strength and you strengthen it, which I think is what the Broncos did with their defense, who could continue to add bodies to it.
Right. Drake Greenwell, if he's fully healthy, he's a thumper. And I think he's a culture driver with that big game experience under his belt. And that was one of the more dominant defenses in the league last year. And offensively, I really like the Evan Ingram signing. I mean,
Okay.
you're betting on health. You're betting that he can, return to form. But I think you and I have talked about this before. I've written about it a few different places throughout my career. I don't know that outside of maybe an all-pro offensive tackle, for a young quarterback, I don't know that there's any position more important than a reliable pass catching after the catch tight end. You saw
Right.
it with Zach Ertz last year with Jaden Daniels, the impact that he had. Ingram now can be that guy for Bo Nix, who showed a lot last year. But if you're going to make a run in the AFC West and you're going to improve, you're going to need your quarterback to take that next step. I think that Ingram helps him get there.
And that's one thing they didn't have is they were trying to throw so many short passes. Didn't have the best weapons overall for Bo Nix. Cortland Sutton is sort of, a 1B type of wide receiver. And his safety valve tight end was like Lucas Krull
Yes.
and like Adam Troutman and stuff like that. So here you're right, you're banking on health. The newer version of Ingram, I mean, I still kind of remember the Giants guy who was a seam stretcher who dropped passes. Now he's get open over the middle, catch your 6-yard pass, move the chains, move the chains. I think that is helpful. I think they need to be still adding on offense. Those moves, Greenlaw and Hufanga on defense, means that they can kind of focus their draft on offense, where there's a lot of tight end talent. There's a lot of running back talent, which I think they could use. And there's enough
Absolutely.
receiver talent to add guys.
For sure. I'm going to stay in the AFC West for another one of my winners, and maybe we'll butt heads on this a little bit.
But
I like what the Chargers have done. I think that, a lot of people have labeled Najee Harris a plotter, and some of that is true. But,
yeah.
He was fifth in the league in explosive runs. I think he led the league or was second behind Saquon Barkley in forced missed tackles.
Yeah.
They're looking to upgrade the offensive line, which they're thinking they might have been able to do if Mekhi Becton is the high level graduate of Statland University and not the former first round bust of the Jets. You put Mekhi Becton next to Joe Alt, really promising young tackle, Najee Harris in the backfield. It feels like you're starting to finally build an offense around what Greg Roman does best, the offensive coordinator, wanting to run downhill in a hurry. And that's got to help Justin Herbert a little bit.
Yeah, I think that what they're doing well is that they're building a really Greg Roman type offense. I think the thing they're doing really poorly is that they're building a Greg Roman type offense, where you see it. It's like we have to add more offensive linemen, more beef the offensive line. Another guy who can break 2 tackles to gain 4.5 yards. I like it. I actually enjoy watching that type of play, but we've kind of see it is a restrictor plate on what you can do. I like Harris more than most people. I get what they're doing on the offensive line. I think Josh Palmer is a little bit of a loss, even though he was hurt last year. I think Joey Bosa is a little bit of a loss, even though he was hurt last year. I don't know. Asante Samuel is not yet signed, as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there and why he's still floating on the market and why the Chargers haven't tried to bring him back.
Right. I know he was talking to the Cardinals. I mean, if I were Brad Holmes, I'd be like, come to Detroit. Come to Detroit. Help us. But for whatever reason, again, he's another guy who had some injuries along the way. It's very kind of sideways.
Yes.
Even Najee J.K. Robbins was healthy most of last year and was a plotter, as he will be. Breaks a lot of tackles. His breakaway ability is kind of So it's kind of sideways. And so you're a team that's on the playoff tier and you're listing sideways. Meanwhile, one of your division foes is getting better in the Broncos. You can see that. And I think it's just like if they had not kept Bosa and Mack last year, now granted, they wouldn't have had a playoff season that's significant, but then they wouldn't be making these sort of compromised decisions this year. And yeah, they brought back Mike Williams, who,
I scratch my head at that. It's like he goes to New York and he's irrelevant. And
Mhm.
this is the only time we're mentioning Aaron Rodgers on this podcast. He lands in
Oh,
Aaron
good.
Rodgers' dungeon of pain. And then he goes to Pittsburgh, and there's this thought that he's going to be the field stretcher opposite of George Pickens, and he's going
Mhm.
to have all this upside because Russell Wilson loves throwing the ball deep down the field. It doesn't materialize there. And unless there's some sort of like magic elixir or magic connection between Justin
Mhm.
Herbert and Mike Williams, I don't I, I don't get it.
He Williams will be the guy who isn't open and doesn't catch the jump ball when we hear about why Justin Herbert needs more weapons, which is kind of was his role 2 years ago. So it goes back to that. So that's why I wasn't high on that. I was not high on the Patriots. I know you were higher on the Patriots.
I was okay. I mean, the Patriots. I like the moves on defense, right? I like Milton Williams. I think that was a marquee signing. I thought bringing him in there, pay him the money. You need to win along the line of scrimmage. The Eagles have authored the blueprint. Bringing Carlton Davis in. Okay, now you have a dominant corner opposite of Christian Gonzalez. Morgan Moses has some upside. I don't know that he's the cornerstone tackle. We'll see.
Mhm.
But you still need to get weapons for Drake May. Who's he throwing the football to? That's still a concern.
Right, and those guys weren't out there.
Right.
If they would have wanted Godwin, clearly he wasn't out there, so they kind of went to this choice, and that's it. Like this is a lot of money and a lot of guys. When it's like, well, we didn't get what we want, so here's what we got instead. I feel like it looks that way. Now, you're right. If Milton Williams is the guy we saw from maybe week 13 on through the Super Bowl, that makes it for the Patriots because now they've got this like penetrating monster in the middle. It makes everything else look good. Obviously, they have health issues in the middle of their defensive line that'll take away some of that problem. If he's the guy who, for 3.5 years in Philly, was a good rotational piece, just a good rotational piece. There's a reason that we didn't talk endlessly about the greatness of Milton Williams until the playoffs.
Right.
If that's what you got, then what you got really was a bunch of guys. And that includes Landry, and that includes Spillane, and that includes Hollins. All these, you added a lot of ballast. Now, again, Carlton Davis is a hell of a player. That's fine. You put that right in there, you get your starting corner. It's just that, like, it was, especially on day one, a lot of, hey, we got this, we got this, we got this. What does it really amount to?
Right. And I thought that was kind of they tried to make some splashy signings at
Yeah.
positions of need, whereas Chicago, who I think might have just hit a grand slam out of the park,
Mhm.
they look at their needs, and it was targeted aggressiveness, like you talked about at the top of the show. You trade for Joe Thuney before free agency begins. You trade for Jonah Jackson. You still need a center, so you go get Drew Dalman, the best center available if he's healthy coming out of Atlanta. You
Yeah.
need to get better along the defensive line. You go get Grady Jarrett, who never quite seemed happy,
Yeah.
last year in Atlanta, but still really productive interior pass rusher. And before writing the column this weekend, Mike, I've sent out a text message to 6 different executives who did the best, who helped themselves the most. Take your team out of the equation. I don't want
Mhm.
to hear that you thought you did great.
Right.
Tell me who helped themselves the most outside of what you've done. And everyone I spoke to mentioned in some form or fashion the Bears. One
Mhm.
executive told me that they added big time trench players on both sides of the football, and another veteran front office executive told me they checked their biggest box, adding 3 starting offensive linemen. It was a meat and potatoes free agency haul in a meat and potatoes free agency class, and I thought the Bears got better this week.
Yeah, at first I was kind of like, it's just a thing. And then you realize, yeah, it was very focused on the offensive line, and then Jared on the other side, focused on positions of need. It wasn't a spending spree. And again, it's Johnson now. It's somebody who can come in like, I'm an offensive guru, offensive line guru. I know what I want. This is what I'm going out there and getting. And I see it that way. And one of the things that crossed, I think, all of our decks is like the betting odds for rookies are starting to come in, and like the Bears are the favorites to get Boise State running back superstar Ashton Jeanty,
Yeah,
and I see it. I see it.
I
Okay,
know.
because it's like you can't go to a bad team. We can't Saquon this kid and make him stick him on the Giants for 5 years. But now you get this offensive line. You got Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams will need a safety valve. He does have some receivers. You put that kid on there, and you say
Great
we're
pass
going to do
catcher, averages like 47 yards a carry. I
right,
mean, look
right,
out.
right, right. Talk about tackle breaking ability, and you say, oh, this is going to look a lot like what the Lions do because there's going to be a lot of gropo football with, but we have a quarterback who can get it deep. That all makes sense to me. If that's the direction they go, they can go in other directions. But I can see that vision there.
Yeah, I can too. And I think it's a great fit. I mean, you could talk about adding Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, as that, security valve. But if Ashton Genty is on the board, that feels like a kid who's tough to pass up for what the Bears are building, what they need, and to really maximize the impact of the offensive line that you just went out and spent significant resources trying to build. Mike, after, free agency kind of picked up speed and then slowed down, a couple people on social media they said, make sure on the next podcast that you and Mike get into the Justin Fields signing, because I think that you and I are going to vary a little bit differently on Justin Fields going to New York.
Okay.
And I'm one of the last remaining Justin Fieldsians.
No, you're not. No, you're not. The internet's full of them.
I'm in good company.
You're in great company. You're in great. The Justin Fields, hive, the Fields furries. I don't.
Fieldsian
I have
society.
to. I have to workshop that a little bit. Remain strong. Like nothing defeats their love of Fields' upside.
Yeah, I look at it now. I'm not going to say that it's the best situation he's been in because we could have talked about the friendly
Yes.
soft landing in Arthur Smith's offense last year.
Right.
But I can see the vision. I can see that you have two really good running backs. I can see that you put them back there and you have Garrett Wilson to throw to. They've done some nice work upgrading the offensive line in New York. And I don't know that if you talk to the Pittsburgh Steelers, if there isn't some regret about pulling him at 4-2 based on how the season ended because of his plus mobility, because of his ability to throw between the hashes. I can see the vision of Justin Fields at 26 years old hitting his stride with the Jets.
I see the vision of him being in a position here where the Jets can market him as a feel good story, as a we're trying something different. Have the expectations a little lower, and here's a guy that's very easy to root for. I see all that. I think we have to stop him. It sounds the way you're discussing him, what you're thinking him, not as this lottery ticket with this incredible upside that needs to be unlocked, but as somebody that if you put him into your offense and you say we're going to give his mobility, make that part of the equation, that this guy lowers your, I mean, this guy improves your floor.
Yes.
But Justin Fields is going to come in. Yes, you can run like read option things. He can threaten the defense downfield because he has a great arm, and there's this unpredictability factor. But with that, you have to realize that guy, if he ever comes through the door, is not going to come through the door anytime soon in terms of Justin Fields. He even last year, late in his run with the Steelers, I feel like the Steelers. I don't think they had any regrets. Let's put it that way. I think that Arthur Smith was kind of making things very structured for him. I think George Pickens was getting frustrated with how infrequently the ball was getting downfield, and that's why the change was made. So if your standards are low and the idea is, hey, he's going to go out there, he can keep this team competitive for 6, 7, 8 wins, then it's a win for Justin Fields. But that's where we set the bar at this point.
Yeah, to me, you put him into a backfield alongside Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, you can kind of emphasize the mobility. If he can cut down on the turnovers, which he did through that start last year, he had 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, protected the ball a little bit more, had some fumbling issues, but he's always had fumbling issues.
Yeah.
But if you can cut down on those things, I could see him being someone elevating the floor, whatever you want to say. I think they're a 500 or better team with Justin Fields in a way that they just weren't. If they can jump out to some leads early and then lean on those running backs, all of a sudden the defense isn't playing from behind as they have been the last 2 years.
Of course, Aaron Rodgers was their quarterback. We said we weren't going to mention them last year. They should have been able to win with defense last year. So I don't know how much raising the floor here helps. But you do have fumbling issues when he runs too much. You do have sack issues. He throws a lot of sort of gutter balls. He was very safe within the structure last year. I mean, I would have these conversations. Jared Bailey covers the Steelers, and we'd be talking about, it's like, did you watch the same game I watched? It was 6-6 at halftime. Like, this team was not moving the ball. Then he got like a roughing the passer penalty. He led the league in roughing the passer penalties. They got another field goal, it was 9-6, and then TJ Watt did something and it scored a touchdown. That's kind of how the Jets have to win. That's how the Steelers won some games last year. the Jets are not the Steelers. Even at their best, they're still that Jets element. But again, what I'm hopeful of this is like the gloves are going to be on in New York in terms of like coming after Justin Fields in any way, because you recognize this guy's coming in who has have struggled in Chicago, struggled in Pittsburgh, is here because things didn't work out. Let's not rip this guy. Let's not make this guy the Sanchez or anything else like that. Let's go out there and sort of see what he can do and not turn this into one of those meat grinders from a mental emotional standpoint, the way the Jets often are.
For sure. And it's almost like a no lose situation for the Jets, right? Because if you go out and you take a
Yeah.
wide receiver early and you can have a dominant wide receiver duo for Justin Fields, okay, you have some offensive weapons around him now, a complete offense. Maybe he, at 26 years old, there's still the upside that he's going to be the franchise quarterback. But if it doesn't work out, if he's still just a 2,500 yard, 15 touchdown, 12 interception, 18 total turnover guy,
Mhm.
chances are you're going to be picking near the top of the board next year. And you can look at, Drew Aller or Arch Manning or any of the other top
Yeah.
quarterbacks coming out of next year's draft. And you can look at Justin Fields and say, okay, he was a bridge guy. Maybe we bring him back to mentor the kid, but we can turn the page. It's almost like you're either building to win now or a guy that you're not investing a whole lot into that you can turn the page after this year.
That's true. And it's mostly a 1 year deal of
Yeah.
money you've got. The money's here. Just spend it to do this. There is no where they're picking in the draft. There is no wide receiver unless you count Travis Hunter, who won't be there. I don't think by that point. So that's a little tricky. It's funny because we just did the first next year's quarterback class is stacked of
Right.
this draft class, and it is stacked. And I was just thinking, okay, so say the Jets have like the first or second pick, and it's Arch Manning is sitting there. How much NIL money could Arch Manning get by portaling and avoiding the Jets?
Especially at the University of Texas or
Well, yeah, he could
transferring
stay at
somewhere
Texas,
to like Ohio State or LSU or wherever. Yeah.
or Ole Miss or
Mhm.
Tennessee, where he puts Arch Manning on his jersey, and like the boosters come out of the woodwork throwing money up in the air, like we, or what are dad and grandpa, well, not, uncle and grandpa and uncle and dad, and dad and everybody telling him it's like it's the Jets, man. It's the Jets. Like you don't have to tell me. I know. I'm portaling. I'm NILing. So like I hate to say that, but like that's one of the factors. Almost has to be in the back of your mind these days.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you going to wind up? And kids are being a lot more selective and a lot more patient to stay in school at all levels of the draft, all 3 rounds. There's 7 rounds, especially in the top three. But you talk about money, Mike. Your thoughts on the Bengals finally committing to T. Higgins, finally locking up Jamar Chase, long-term record-setting contracts. To me, it's one of those things where this is how they win.
Yeah.
This is how Joe Burrow prefers to win. Joe Burrow's an elite quarterback. We've now set our quarterback up to be all in for the next 4 years with his top targets.
Yeah, and you know what? If I'm being hypercritical, I'd be like, well, Howie Roseman would have gotten all this done last year, and it would have been this much percentage lower on the cap, and it would have been everything else like that. Whatever. I haven't looked at the details, but it's like this was necessary. They got it done. They got it done at the right time. Nothing, no notes. You got this accomplished. It's very important for this team.
Well, Mike, I'm fired up about our next guest, one of the all-time great wide receivers in Cincinnati Bengals history, a two-time All-Pro. Few people better to talk about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase's mega contracts this week than Carl Pickens joining us now. And you can follow him on Instagram, the Carl Pickens. Carl, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
We're doing great, and we're pumped up to have you here, especially now, especially this week after the first week of free agency. And the Bengals really making big news. Jamar Chase, the record-setting $161 million contract. He's the highest paid receiver ever. T. Higgins, the highest paid #2 wide receiver ever at $115 million. And, as someone who was a #1 wide receiver in Cincinnati for a long time, what does it mean, in your opinion, for that franchise to commit that much money to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and keep them a part of the fold?
I think they're serious. I mean, that's the nucleus of the team. Offensively with Joe and Higgins and Chase, and they've got a good running back, and that's the nucleus right there, and that's where you have to start with that team. They can score a lot of points. Defense, they've got to pick it up a little bit, but as far as Joe and Higgins and Chase, I mean, in my opinion, you have to start there.
For sure. And Jamar Chase, now the highest paid receiver in the NFL. Do you think he's deserving of that title when you look around at some of the great receivers in the league? And what sets him apart from a lot of the other great pass catchers? Because, of course, you got the Justin Jeffersons, you got A.J. Brown in Philadelphia, fresh off a Super Bowl. You got George Pickens in Pittsburgh. You got all these elite wide receivers. What sets Jamar Chase apart?
Well, I think the Bengals think he's worth that type of money, or else they wouldn't have paid him. They believe in him. He's proven, that he can go out and put up the numbers consistently, which he has done, the previous few years. So they trust him. They know he's going to come to work every day, do what he needs to do, be a leader on the team. So, they gave him a lot of money, and then he has to hold up his end of the bargain, which I think he can. I think he's a smart player. I think he's a very aggressive route runner. He can make plays even though he's not open all the time. And he's a good fit with Joe. The chemistry they've had, they had it prior to the league. So it's almost a no-brainer. And then you bring in, T. Higgins, who's taking a lot of pressure off of Jamar as far as being double team and stuff like that. So each one of those guys can get their numbers. It's just it's a good time, to be a Bengal wide receiver now.
Yeah. You went through some contract negotiations with that team. I think you had some things that got extended, protracted a little bit in your career. What's that like? What's it like having that in the background as you're trying to go out there and do your job?
I think at the end of the day, you just have to put your trust in your agent, because looking back on it now, I didn't realize this at the time, and I don't think a lot of guys do. Eventually, they will sign you. The Browns, Mike and those guys, eventually they will sign you. You just keep doing your job, keep coming to work every day, and show that, you're one of the leaders on the team, and they will sign you. Most of the time, they always do. And this is, obvious here with these three guys. It just takes a while. Sometimes it's a different process than, other general managers and team owners. But I think at the end of the day, most of the time they sign their guys.
I like the way you said it. Most of the time they always do. I like the way you said that. You hedge your bets a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's a process, and frustration begins to play a part in it. And then some guys may want to leave. Some guys may not have the patience to wait and hold out and, hope for a better deal, or some guys are frustrated with getting the tag multiple years. So I think at the end of the day, you have to have a good agent that has a rapport with the Browns, and they can go in there and communicate and talk and, get things done. But now in today's, game, the number is pretty much set. You mentioned Justin Jefferson and some other guys, CeeDee Lamb, they put the number up as far as, $30 million a year, 35. So you got to have a guy that says, hey, if you think I'm, on the same level as these guys, then I need to be paid that way. So it's a give and take, but it's always strenuous with the Browns, with the Bengals, but they'll get it done.
Carl, when you look at T. Higgins, he's now the highest paid number 2 receiver in the league. There was some thought going into this offseason, after they used the franchise tag on him for a second time, that he was a guy that could be a number 1 wide receiver elsewhere. Do you agree with that? And also, what do you think makes his chemistry with Joe Burrow so strong? Because even though Jamar Chase and Burrow go back together to LSU, Joe Burrow talks all the time about how valuable T. Higgins is and how much he wanted to keep him. What do you think makes their chemistry, in particular, T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, so strong right now?
I think with those two guys that, again, like I said earlier, they can depend on each other. I mean, T. Higgins does a lot of things to get, Jamar Chase open, and vice versa. Jamar does a lot of things to get T. Higgins open. Both of these guys can make plays. Both of these guys are capable of being number ones on another team. And that may be one of the reasons why, the Bengals didn't want to let him go. They have that chemistry. If you have two great receivers, you can't double team. You can't shade your coverage to one or the other. So that being said, Joe has options. Hey, if Jamar is not where he needs to be, T. Higgins will be, and vice versa. So those guys play off of one another. And I think the main thing is they actually enjoy playing with each other. They get along. They're friends off the field as well. So, I don't know if they're going down to Orlando during the summer to run routes and stuff like that, but they genuinely enjoy playing with each other.
Now that they're both locked in for the long haul and they're going to be in Cincinnati and they're the core after a couple of years of, acrimony and hand-wringing about whether they'd actually get this done.
Yeah.
They're there for the next, 3-4 years, maybe even longer than that. How do you see Joe Burrow's connection with them continuing to evolve even from where it is from here? Because I look at Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow to me is one of the top 2-3 quarterbacks in the league. And now you have that continued chemistry. Yeah. How much better can he and that offense get?
They can go as far as they want to go, but at the same time, defenses are going to change. New players are going to come in and out of the team, and the chemistry may be a little bit different. So your role may be different this year versus what it was last year. But at the end of the day, these guys are under contract for the next 4 or 5 years, so that core will be there. If they can continue to stay together and make plays, some good things will happen. Again, they're going to have to score a lot of points, which they're capable of doing. Even in the games they lost, they scored a ton of points. So, defenses will change. These coordinators will figure out a way to slow one of them down. They may not slow both of them down, but they'll figure out a way to slow them down. But as long as those 3 guys are on the same page, I think the Bengals can score a lot of points.
You were on teams that scored a lot of points. It seems like history repeats itself for the Bengals. You guys, phenomenal seasons. The defense didn't always hold up its end of the bargain. Does it look that way to you? Why do you think that is?
They have a good defense. At times, other teams just make plays. And at times, you may be out of position a little bit, but, offenses on the opposing teams want to score too, so sometimes it's a give and take. You're out there to make plays, and sometimes the guy on the other side just beats you individually for that play, and things happen.
By the way, I noticed you still hold the record, or tied for the record for most touchdowns in Bengals history. Jamar Chase tied it.
Yeah.
What was it like following his journey last year as he was coming closer and closer to that record?
I saw that, and if he does, fine. If he doesn't break it, I think that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But I can hold on to something a little bit longer. But I don't think it's going to be there after this upcoming season.
No?
These guys, they're just phenomenal. They have no problems making plays. And they're good at it, and they want it. They're very aggressive, and they enjoy playing. So, this may be the year.
And can this be the year for the Bengals, Carl? Because obviously it was the slow start that tripped them up last year. They did everything they could over the last month of the season, except they couldn't control that. The Chiefs had absolutely nothing to play for in Week 18 and decided to play the practice squad backups in Denver in the last game of the year. But with Chase back and Higgins back and some of the additions, have they done enough to compete with the Ravens and the Bills and the Chiefs in the AFC?
I don't know. That'll be a good question after the draft. But I think at this particular point in time, these guys are hungry. Chase's contract was hanging over his head. Higgins' contract was over his head last year. So that's in the past. These guys are here. Get into training camp, focusing on the Super Bowl. We were there, 3 years ago? We've got some really good players now. Some seem to think, Kansas City can be beaten now. I don't know. They were exposed a little bit in the Super Bowl. But Baltimore is still going to be around. So there's some teams that Cincinnati is going to have to really compete with. But I think at the end of the day, it's Super Bowl or bust, man. I don't want to put that much pressure on them, but I'm sure they're thinking, okay, we've got our guys in place. We know what we need to do. We know the task at hand. And the only thing we've got to do now is just go out and play like we know how to play, cut down on the mistakes, and see what happens.
And the money does bring a little pressure with it, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know if it brings pressure. If you gave me $40 million a year or $35 million a year, yeah, I'm still going to want to make plays. Honestly,
Right.
yeah, I'm still going to want to make plays, but I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, sometimes, not all the time, but it takes the hunger away from some guys. Honestly, it does. You're not that really. You're motivated, but what do I have to lose? I've got $40 million in the bank.
This,
So I think at the end of the day, the guys still have to go out and live up to their end of the contract.
they don't seem like that kind of guy, where it's like the hunger is going to escape them.
No, they want to play. I mean, they know what's within their grasp.
Yeah.
They got a taste of the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They know what it feels like to get there. They know what it feels like to win that playoff game to get there. Mm-hmm. They want that. I mean, how can you not? You were this close. You want to go back, and whatever sacrifices you have to make to get to that level, to get to that championship game, you have to do it.
Carl, I want to switch gears here real quick, and it's the last one from me. I love asking guys who played this game at the highest level as you did with the Pro Bowl trips and the All-Pro recognitions. If you were playing today, if you hopped in the time machine and you were in your prime and you're lacing them up on a Sunday, who's the cornerback across the league that you're hoping you're lined up against? Who's the measuring stick corner in today's game that you think just stands above the rest, that you would love to go out there and have a game against to show that, hey, you know what? I'm still Carl Pickens. I'm still a playmaker. I'm still the man.
Yeah. I think there's Jalen Ramsey. He's tall. He's physical. He can run. I would, try my luck against him. I don't know that I would be able to outrun him, but I would welcome the challenge to play and see what happens. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of good corners out there, but I just think of Jalen because he's tall, and I'm 6'2", 6'3", and he's in that area, and you rarely get. He covers DK Metcalf sometimes. They're both tall, but I just like the matchup between two tall guys. So I would relish that matchup.
You would be some jump balls in the end zone between the.
Yeah, if it came down to a jump ball, I know I could win that matchup. I mean, I jumped 7'1" in high school. I was a high jumper, so I don't know how high he can jump, but I just feel like I could win that matchup. As far as speed and stuff like that, yeah, he could cover me, but I made plays even though I was covered a lot, so wouldn't be a problem, I guess.
I'm just enjoying. This is my last question. I'm enjoying the jerseys in the background. Behind you, the classic Bengals jersey is behind your head. Folks can't necessarily see it.
Yeah.
Which one means the most for me? I see the Tennessee jersey, the Pro Bowl jersey. Which one means the most to you?
Well, the Bengals, they gave me a shot, man. They called me in '92 and said, "Hey, we think you can, play for us. We want you to become a Bengal." So I did that, and that means the most. The other accomplishments, I didn't set out to go to the Pro Bowl. It just happened. I just kept my head down, made plays, and did what I needed to do. But that was my first professional jersey right there. The Bengal jersey, and hats off to them for giving me an opportunity to play.
I love it. And what a flex with the Pro Bowl jersey over one shoulder and the Bengals jersey over the other. Carl, this is tremendous. Really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoyed the insight. People be sure to follow him on Instagram at the Carl Pickens. He's Bengals legend, all pro, former wide receiver Carl Pickens. Appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you further up the road. All
right, guys. Anytime. You know how to reach me. I appreciate it.
Mike, how much fun was that? How great was talking to Carl Pickens, getting his thoughts on Chase, on Higgins, on the Bengals. Just a great conversation.
I was going to be like, Jeff Blake, what was it like to catch a pass that had a trajectory that went to the moon and came back down? I didn't want to get really deep in the weeds there, but I think that would have been fun. We did have some fun conversations off camera that got a little strange there. We did a good job of not getting Carl and George Pickens mixed up, except for one tragic email. But it was absolutely a lot of fun. I love talking to guys from that era.
Yeah, so do I. And we did get into a little bit. He'd love the chance to get some jump balls against Jalen Ramsey.
I could
Who
see
better to throw you the jump ball than Jeff Blake?
prime Pickens versus Ramsey. That would have been the showdown. That would
Yeah.
have been, it would have been on NFL prime time, and Boomer and Tom Jackson would have been talking about it. Because that was the thing with Pickens. It's like before you were mossing everybody, and of course Moss was mossing people a year or two
Towards
later.
the end, yeah.
The jump ball in the end zone, and it was him, and it was Darnay Scott, and it was Jeff Blake was the quarterback, and that team went 7-9 every year because their defense was horrible, but those guys could play.
Absolutely. And you look at the Bengals going from here. Look, if you win in September, if you can figure out how to win in September, it's the same
Yeah.
old theory every single year, because
ask
just
them.
getting in the tournament, you have Burrow, you have Chase, you have Higgins. Get in and good things happen, but don't trip yourself up in the first 4 weeks again.
We forgot to ask him, how's the team win in September? We got to ask every Bengals person from now. How do you win in September?
Well, hopefully for Cincinnati's sake, we find out this year.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, new segment for free agency, fact or fiction. We
Okay.
touched on this team a little bit earlier. Mike, fact or fiction that the Seattle Seahawks are better today than they were on March 1?
That's not even fiction. That's like propaganda. I'll go with fiction.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the downgrade at wide receiver is too steep. It's too much of a TBD situation at quarterback, going from Geno to Darnold. I'm going to go fiction there. Fact or fiction? Eagles fans are panicking over nothing.
Fiction, because I don't think they're panicking. Do you think they're panicking?
Oh, the Instagram reels and the Threads feed on Threads. Eagles fans seem to, as I wrote in the column, it's almost as if Agent J from Men in Black, Will Smith's character, came down and put the neuralizer in their face and wiped the memory of everything that happened in February. People were screaming, what are they doing? Why are they hitting the reset? Okay, go look at the two deep. Go look at the two deep at almost every position. This might be the deepest roster in the league. And then go look at Howie Roseman's picks in the first 3 rounds of the draft, dating back the last 3 years. Mike, I wrote about this in the column. To give Howie Roseman that many bites at the apple in the first 3 rounds over the next 2 years, they're going to have 12 total picks, and I believe 6 of them in the top 100 over the next 2 years. What are you complaining about, Philly fans?
All the while to keep the nucleus intact for 2 more years, including the nucleus with Saquon, now Lane Johnson, and now why am I blanking? Zach Bond. Yes,
Zach Bond, yes.
You know, it might be where you're getting your information, because I know Facebook was panicking, but Blue Sky was like, "What are you talking about? We understand that this is the compromises that you have to make." But in the neighborhood, they were panicking.
Yes.
My neighbors are like, what's he doing? I was like, last week you were jumping up and down. We kept Saquon and we kept Bond. Now you're like, what's he doing? It's like, he's doing the same thing. So it might be like which social network you're on, or whether somebody's had their coffee or their second drink, as to whether Eagles fans are panicking, which, come to think of it, that's about most topics here in Philly.
5 picks in the top 100 coming out of next year's draft so far, based on the moves they've made. Here, Michael, are the Eagles picks in the top 100 selections over the last 3 years.
Okay.
Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Carter, Trevor Steen, Sidney Brown, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Hunt. So other than Steen, Hunt, and Brown, all are starting players, and people are complaining.
Well, one of the things is the Eagles fans are conditioned to complain, and so many of the guys you mentioned needed the second or third year to break big. So that creates this situation where you're always like, that draft was terrible. And then you read them, oh, that draft was good. It was just terrible on October 1st of that year when these guys weren't starting. This is the one draft where I don't think we have that, because obviously Mitchell and DeJean are good players. But if you start looking at Trotter and Hunt and some of the other guys that could get things out of, yes, this draft class could be almost historic. And then maybe some benefit of the doubt. So whoever gets drafted this year could be the stars of 2026-27.
And Sidney Brown going to be the starting safety in all likelihood. And Jalix Hunt had a couple of big plays in the Super Bowl, made a big impact down the stretch for them. Fact or fiction? Devontae Adams signing with the Rams makes Los Angeles a Super Bowl contender.
Fiction, although they were pretty close anyway. He's a slight upgrade over Cup.
I'm going to go fact here.
Okay.
I don't know how much is left in the tank for Devontae Adams, but I do think catching passes from a competent Matthew Stafford is still offers more upside playing opposite of Puka Nacua, more upside than being force-fed targets when everybody knows you're getting the ball from Aaron Rodgers in New York. Plus, I love what they've done building through the draft. You talk about Howie Roseman, how they've hit the top 100. The Rams have been stellar in those 3, 4, 5 rounds of the draft, mid-round draft picks, getting playmakers. They're all young, and it feels like that division now is wide open for the taking. Adams might not be the catalyst, but I think the Rams are very much in the mix next year.
And I think that's the big thing. If you say Adams mixed with Seahawks kind of going around in circles, like circling a drain slowly, talk with the wrecking ball in San Francisco, and the Cardinals just existing. Yes, them getting a little better when everybody else got a little worse or just is kind of hanging around, that does propel them to saying, well, this is the team that you have to worry about in that division.
Final fact or fiction for you. Someone besides the Kansas City Chiefs wins the AFC West. Put you on the spot here. See, we have to end with the tough one. End with the big one.
Fiction, but I'm only being traditionalist here. It's so close. I think the Broncos can threaten them. I think the Chargers might threaten them because the vulnerability of the Chiefs right now, when we're going into a draft, there's not going to be at 31 an offensive lineman who can start for them next year. There will not be that guy, except maybe a guard, but there will be no tackle who can start for them. And all they got is the old 49ers tackle. I don't know. Maybe let's call it historic fiction.
I'm going with breakthrough fact.
Okay.
I do think that the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix on the trajectory he was on, getting Ingram, getting another year with Cortland Sutton, I don't think they're done at wide receiver. I don't think that they're done adding to that defense, which was really, really good a year ago. And I just look, we all saw what Travis Kelce was outside of the Houston Texans playoff game a year ago and in the Super Bowl. We all saw what that offensive line was. And then you take Joe Thuney out of the equation, who was playing out of position anyway and at a very high level. I still follow the betting advice that you never bet against Patrick Mahomes, that he's the all-time difference maker. But it just seems like losing the Super Bowl combined with the losses early in the offseason, the door is open. And I think that the Broncos are good enough as constructed today to kick that door down.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm still iffy on that. But in terms of the Bills have heard the dinner bell. Yes, and I think the Bengals kind of heard the dinner bell a little bit if they can get themselves there. The Ravens are doing what they can. It's a good time to be one of those teams that's already there and saying we can do it this year. This is finally the time where they're vulnerable enough that they're not going to do magic on us in the playoffs.
Mike, what's coming up on the Two Deep Zone in the next couple of days?
Taking a little break from the free agency stuff because it's taken a break from us, and there's going to be a Cardinals all-time top 5 quarterbacks. I know you're excited about the Cardinals all-time top 5 quarterbacks, but they're next on the list, and draft coverage is starting next week.
Is it the 96? Is it Two Deep Zone 96 dropping?
Deep Zone 96 kicks off next week, and so I've got players numbers 1 through 12 already queued up to go.
Phenomenal.
What do you got?
So we have the mailbag each Friday where people can ask their questions either in the Substack chat, on Threads, or Blue Sky. I'll pose those questions to executives around the league, probably kicking off a couple of draft profiles of prospects who we spoke to in Mobile. Some pro day coverage coming up here for a couple of schools in the region. And of course, the podcast will be back in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah, so of course, if you enjoy Mike Tanier's analysis here on the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe to Mike Tanier's Two Deep Zone on Substack. Follow him on Blue Sky at Mike Tanier. Follow me on Threads at Matt Lombardo NFL. Check out the YouTube channel at Matt Lombardo 975. Subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store to the Between the Hashmarks podcast. And Mike, this was a lot of fun. Thanks to Carl Pickens. Check him out on Instagram, the Carl Pickens. And Mike, I'll talk to you and everybody else in 2 weeks.
I am the hander outer, ladies and gentlemen.